There's a gardening method out there that's so powerful it can practically triple what you harvest, and the wild part is it doesn't take much effort at all. Over the years, people have brushed it off, laughed at it, and in some cases even tried to regulate it out of existence. Not because it fails, but because it goes straight against the system that modern industrial agriculture is built on. Believe it or not, some city gardeners have actually gotten cited just for using this approach in their own backyards. The USDA even has rules limiting its use on certain federal lands. And still, when you look at the research, the science keeps confirming that this works better than almost anything else you can do to improve your soil. So why haven't you heard about it before? Why isn't this front and center in every gardening class or agricultural program across America? The truth is a little uncomfortable. It forces us to rethink the way we've been trained to garden, and, more importantly, it makes you wonder who benefits when we keep doing things the hard, expensive way. What I'm about to share could completely shift how you see growing your own food. I'm talking about deep organic mulching. And once you really understand how it works, you'll probably shake your head and ask yourself why you ever bothered with anything else. The idea itself is almost laughably simple. You grab organic material, hay, straw, wood chips, fallen leaves, and instead of sprinkling on a thin decorative layer, you pile it on thick right over the soil. I'm not talking about a couple inches to make things look tidy. I mean anywhere from 6 to 20 inches of organic matter laid directly on top of the ground. You don't till it in. You don't bury it. You just leave it alone and let it do what nature has been doing on forest floors for millions of years. Over the last century, two remarkable pioneers really dialed this method in, and their stories are something else. Ruth Stout, born in 1884, earned the nickname the Mulch Queen. Starting in the 1930s, she began using spoiled hay, stuff farmers couldn't even sell for livestock, and turned it into gardening gold. For decades in Connecticut, she gardened that way, wrote books, gave talks, and showed people how she'd basically eliminated the back-breaking chores everyone thought were just part of the deal. She quit plowing altogether. She stopped weeding. She cut out most of the exhausting labor that makes gardening feel like a second full-time job. Meanwhile, her gardens flourished year after year as she watched her neighbors wear themselves out doing it the conventional way. Then there's Paul Gauci, the man behind what he calls the Back to Eden method. He built his approach around free wood chips from arborists. His documentary has racked up millions of views, and his garden in Washington state has basically become a pilgrimage site for folks who can't believe what they're seeing with their own eyes. Trees that shouldn't stand a chance in his climate are thriving. Soil that started out as dense, stubborn clay has transformed into dark, crumbly earth packed with life. Both of these approaches follow a no-till, no-dig philosophy, and once they're set up, they require surprisingly little work to maintain. They copy what happens naturally on a forest floor, where leaves and organic debris fall, break down, and feed the soil continuously, without anyone firing up a rototiller. So why do I call this method forbidden? Because it clashes with just about everything we've been told good gardening is supposed to look like. Think about the image most of us grew up with. Straight, tidy rows, freshly tilled soil, bare earth between plants, a garden that looks neat, controlled, and orderly. Deep mulching throws that whole picture out the window. Some homeowner associations and local governments even have aesthetic rules against what they see as messy or unkempt gardens. There have been real cases where people received citations simply for having thick layers of organic material in their yards. In Toledo, urban farmers got tangled up in disputes over mulch piles that ended up requiring city negotiations to sort out. The USDA restricts the use of non-certified weed-free hay and straw on national forest lands. And for years, gardeners were scared off by something called the nitrogen robbery myth, which warned that using wood chips near plants would starve them of nutrients. Maybe most damaging of all, though, is the way this method looks. Compared to those magazine-perfect rows of freshly turned soil that garden centers and glossy catalogs have trained us to admire, deep mulching can seem almost primitive. But here's where things really start to get interesting. When you dig into the actual peer-reviewed research, you find out that what these pioneers were saying all along holds up. The evidence backs them. And one of the first places you see that truth show up is in moisture retention, which by itself can completely change the way you experience gardening. When researchers pulled together a massive meta-analysis, 74 different studies and more than 300 separate yield observations, they found something hard to ignore. Mulching can boost crop production by as much as 60%. That's not a small bump. That's a game changer. One of the main reasons is actually pretty straightforward. A thick layer of mulch cuts down on evaporation from exposed soil, which means the ground holds onto moisture a whole lot longer. Depending on the crop, studies show irrigation needs can drop anywhere from 14% to 70%. That's huge. Ruth Stout used to grow potatoes through hot Connecticut summers without watering them at all. The water that would normally disappear from bare soil in just a few hours can stick around for days when it's protected under deep mulch, staying right there where plant roots can reach it. Another major advantage, one that traditional gardening advice barely talks about, is temperature control. Research shows that organic mulch can lower soil temperatures by more than 10 degrees Celsius during extreme heat. That thick blanket of organic matter works like insulation, cooling the soil in summer and helping it stay warmer when winter rolls around. Modern agronomists have found that deep hay mulch can keep soil temperatures hovering near 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which just so happens to be ideal for crops like potatoes. Bare soil can swing by 30 degrees in a single day, but mulched soil stays surprisingly steady. When your plants aren't constantly dealing with temperature shock, they grow stronger, and that stability translates directly into higher yields. But the biggest transformation happens underground, where you can't even see it. Deep mulching sets off a boom in soil life. And this is something conventional agriculture mostly overlooks, even though it may be the most important piece of the puzzle. Organic mulch encourages beneficial fungi that break down lignin and unlock phosphorus, making nutrients available that would otherwise stay trapped in the soil. Earthworms absolutely thrive under thick mulch layers, sometimes multiplying tenfold or more. These little workers naturally aerate the soil and leave behind nutrient-rich castings throughout the root zone. In other words, they're doing the job of a rototiller, without wrecking the soil structure the way machinery does. A separate meta-analysis covering 56 studies confirmed that organic practices significantly increase soil microbial abundance. Gardeners who've switched to deep mulching often say that a single season of doing it this way sparks more biological activity than years of conventional tilling ever achieved. At that point, you're not just growing vegetables anymore. You're building a living, breathing ecosystem right under your feet. Now, let's talk about the big objection that's been hanging over this whole method for decades: the nitrogen robbery myth. This idea has probably done more damage to deep mulching's reputation than anything else. The theory sounds convincing at first. Wood-based materials are high in carbon and low in nitrogen. So, when they start breaking down, soil microbes supposedly grab nitrogen from your plants to help decompose all that carbon. It sounds scientific. It's printed in gardening books. Extension offices have repeated it for years. And, to be fair, when you till wood chips directly into the soil, that effect can actually happen. But here's the part nobody emphasized. When wood chips are left on the surface as mulch and not mixed into the soil, they don't steal nitrogen from your plants. Laboratory research has been showing this since the 1990s. The University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources found that surface mulch can actually increase soil nitrogen over time as it slowly breaks down. Right at the thin boundary where the mulch touches the soil, something interesting happens. That zone helps suppress weed seeds from sprouting. Meanwhile, the established roots of your crops below that layer keep growing just fine, completely unaffected. The key is simple. Keep the mulch on top and don't till it in. And when you look at real-world results, the numbers are almost hard to believe. Gardeners all over the place have tested these methods after being told they wouldn't work, and the harvests speak for themselves. In 2021, one backyard gardener using the Ruth Stout approach pulled in more than 130 pounds of potatoes from a relatively small plot. That's not theory. That's dinner on the table. Harvesting was actually easier than the traditional way because the potatoes were sitting right on top of the soil under the hay. I didn't have to dig at all. I just pulled the mulch aside and picked them up. In hot, dry weather, tomato plants grown in mulched beds have produced yields nearly 68% higher than those in bare soil. Ruth Stout documented steady potato harvests of 50 to 60 bushels per 1,000 square feet, and she kept that up for decades without buying fertilizer or irrigation equipment. If you want to try her method, start with at least 6 to 8 inches of mulch. Ruth often suggested going as thick as 20 inches because it settles over time. Spoiled hay works best, and farmers will often give it away just to clear it out. Each year, you simply add more as it breaks down, and that slow decomposition is what builds rich, living soil. For the Back to Eden approach, Paul Gauci recommends adding about 2 inches of wood chips every couple of years. Fall is ideal, since it mimics how leaves naturally fall in forests. You can often get free wood chips from arborists through services like Chip Drop. Just avoid allelopathic trees like black walnut or eucalyptus, since they can inhibit plant growth. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't perfect. Slugs and snails love hay mulch, which can hurt crops like lettuce and strawberries. Voles and mice may burrow underneath. In very wet seasons, potatoes can rot before sprouting, and it usually takes 1 to 3 years for the system to fully establish. Climate matters too. What works in the rainy Pacific Northwest may need tweaking elsewhere. Plus, you need a good supply of organic material, which isn't always easy in cities. Still, the big question remains: why isn't this widely taught? Deep mulching challenges industries worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Synthetic fertilizers alone represent a $200+ billion global market. Add pesticides, herbicides, and tilling equipment, and you're looking at a system built on selling inputs year after year. If people can grow food without constantly buying those products, that cuts into profits. Universities have historically focused on large-scale conventional agriculture, often tied to corporate funding. Deep mulch also requires patience. Real results show up after a couple of years, and it doesn't look as neat as magazine gardens. Here's the simple truth as I see it. This method isn't illegal. It's just unconventional. The science supports it. It hasn't been ignored because it fails, but because it works too well and costs too little. Lay down a thick layer of organic material. Let worms, fungi, and microbes rebuild your soil. Watch it turn dark, rich, and alive. The forest floor has been showing us this system for millions of years. Maybe it's time we stopped fighting nature and started working with it instead. If you found this video interesting, subscribe to the Still Growing Seniors channel. It helps this community grow and keeps these quiet, useful gardening conversations alive.